Hello and welcome to part 2 of the Git and GitHub tutorial series. Here is what we will be covering today. We will do a quick recap of part 1. We will then go ahead and set up a free GitHub account, go over what you get with the account and general tips. We will then configure Git Bash to work with GitHub and then do a quick demonstration of how to push or upload a Git project into GitHub. We will then stop using Git Bash and go ahead and do an installation of the Windows Client, which is the GUI client. We will then do a setup and a demonstration of how to use all of the functions that Git Bash gave us in a Windows Client. And finally, we will talk about branching, merging, cloning, and forking, which will be covered in depth in part 3 of this video series. Okay, so let's get started with the recap. We all know Git is a version control system. It works locally on your computer, which means you need a Git client of some sort on your computer. In part 1, we used Git Bash, which is the command line version of the Git version control system. By using the command git init, you will make your project folder into a Git project, or Git repository. Your project is commonly referred to as the working directory. To save a snapshot or a commit, you will need to use the command git add to add files to the staging area, or the index in the diagram. By putting files into the staging area, it will tell Git you want to track these files on your next snapshot or commit. Once you are done adding files to the staging area, you can go ahead and run the git commit command to complete the snapshot. At this point, the staging area is cleaned out. In order to do another commit, you will need to add all of the files that you want to track back into the staging area. This gives you the flexibility of telling Git what you want to track in each snapshot. It's also important to remember that when you do a git add or a git commit, your source code does not get altered. It does not get copied or removed. Other useful commands are git status, which will tell you a status of each file, git log, which will show you all of your snapshots, git diff will show you all of the changes that has occurred in your working directory. Any files added to the index or staging area will not be reported with git diff. Git diff cached will report any changes to files that have been added to the staging area. That is it for the recap. Let's go ahead and start setting up our GitHub account. As you can see, we are on GitHub's website, and before we move on to create an account, there's one thing I just want to point out. We are right now using an HTTPS connection, which means we are using a secure connection. That's something you want to look for the first time you're on GitHub or any other time you're on. You want to make sure that your connection is secure when you go ahead and log in. Since we don't have an account, we'll go ahead and go to our sign up and pricing link and click that. We will be creating an open source account, mostly because it's free. That means all of your source code is open to the public. They can go ahead and look at it and download it. If you want to protect your source code, then you're going to have to sign up for a plan that allows you to have private repositories. This of course means having a monthly fee. The prices are reasonable, and if you maintain your own website, then the micro plan is probably a good place to start for you. But for our purposes, let's go ahead and create a free account. So the first thing it asks you to do is select a username. Remember, GitHub is a place where a lot of business professionals go to store code. So it's wise to have a professional looking business name. Maybe even use your own personal name if you're actually going to use this account for personal or professional business. Since I'm going to be deleting this account once I'm done with tutorials, I'm just going to use test308tube. Again, with the email address, you might not want to use your own personal email. You might want to use a business email or create a completely new email account. For your password, make sure that it is a strong password. Oops, messed that up. And then go ahead and hit create account. As you can see, it logs you straight into the account. So let's take a look around. Let's start with the top menu bar. It has the title, a search, which we won't use. If you select this, this will bring you to your activity page, which is public or open to the public. So let's go ahead and go back real quick. This button allows you to create a new repository. This will allow you to change your account settings, which we will look into in depth in a second. And of course, you can log out. Now, this big banner over the middle will give you some tutorials on how to actually use GitHub. They're okay, but we'll be going through the same thing with Git Bash and with the Windows GUI client. Down here on the lower right, it shows that you currently have no repositories, and you can click this button to create new repositories. So let's go ahead and look at the account settings. So right away is your profile. You can put in your real name, a public email that's different from your email that you use to start your account, your web URL if you're part of a company, if you want to share your location. Change your password, change your username, adding a different email, notification centers, kind of pretty all standard basic. If you want to upgrade from a free account to one of the larger accounts, payment history, your SSH key. Now this is a very important tab. This is what's going to allow you to upload code to your GitHub account. So in order to do this, we need to create an RSA key on your local box, and then we will share the public key to GitHub. At this point, GitHub will trust our client because we have the private key on our local PC. We'll get into that when we start setting up Git Bash, and Windows GUI client actually does this automatically, so you actually don't even have to do this if you're using the Windows GUI client. Your security history will tell you anything important that has been done. As you can see, when we create a new user, when we first created this account, it went ahead and logged that. Applications, not something we'll have to worry about for now. Repositories, since we have no source code projects in GitHub right now, since we just recreated it, it's empty. Organizations, this is purely optional, but from here you have two options. You can create an organization, then associate your account to that new organization, or you can change your account into an organization. So the account you just created is actually a business, so you want to create that into an organization. This is just an example. It doesn't have to be a business, but by doing this, it gives you a lot of flexibility. By having an organizations, you are allowed to create teams, and these teams will be given permission to view specific projects. You really only need organizations for large collaborative efforts, or if you're managing multiple projects with different team members in each project. Let's go ahead and go back to the main page, and if you click our username, again, this is the public facing page. It shows that we have 0 repositories. You can go ahead and create a new repository, and here is a public feed in which it shows you everything that you've done. So since this is a free account, everything that you do will be accessible to the public and viewable to the public. Let's go ahead and create a new repository, and we will name this YouTube demo, and then we could say test project for YouTube. And again, we're gonna have to make this public since this is a free account, and then we are not going to initialize it with a readme file. I just want to create an empty repository, so we'll go ahead and say create. This is what an empty repository looks like in GitHub. As you can see, here are some Git Bash commands in which you can use to create a new repository, and these commands should look fairly familiar to you by now. Also, if you have an existing repository, this is how you would push or upload a Git project into GitHub, but we actually need to do some work before we can actually use these commands. So if you go ahead and click on your name here, or click on your name here, it'll bring you back to the public page again. And as you can see, here is our new Git project that's visible to everyone. So if you click back in, I just want to talk briefly about this tab right here. We are currently on the code tab, but since there's no code, it just shows us this instructions. The network tab really isn't going to have anything that's important to you right now. The pull request is if another user sees your project and wants to improve upon your project or fix a bug, they'll go ahead and fork your code or clone your code do something to it, and they'll ask for a pull request, which basically means, hey, I done something to your project, can you merge it into your project and, you know, make it part of the main branch or master branch. Issues is people can open issues telling you that there's a bug or there's an issue, and you can either resolve it in code or say it's not an issue. A wiki, everybody knows what a wiki is. It allows you to write information about your source code. These graphs are for reporting, and each Git project has an administrative page. So this is only for this specific repository. So each one of your repositories can have something different under this admin tab. It's different from your account settings tab. So you have some standard basic options here that I'm not going to go over. Collaborators is anybody that's working with you on your code for GitHub. You just add their GitHub username here. Service hooks is if you want to share your commits with another application outside of GitHub. And what I really want to talk about is these deploy keys. A deploy key is an SSH key that can be stored on a server. And what it basically does, it allows the server to have access to your repository. So if you have some sort of automated deployment set up on your server, it can just right away grab code from your repository once you've actually updated the repository and run it. This tutorial series will not be using this feature, but I did want to point this out because it is different from the SSH keys that you have in your account settings. Let's go ahead and go back to the main page again. And really the last thing I want to cover before we move on to actually doing something in Git Bash is I want to talk to some of the social aspects of GitHub. Here on GitHub, you're able to follow friends and also fellow developers and see what kind of open source projects that they're currently working on. Remember, they have to be open source in order for you to see what they're doing. The other feature that I want to talk about, and one that I use more often, is the watch feature. A lot of times you'll have a lot of open source projects that you actively use in your own programming. Things like, for me, jQuery, in which I want to keep up to date with that. And since jQuery is being tracked on GitHub, I can select the watch feature, which means I will get email notifications anytime that project is updated or if there's any changes to the project. This is something that I really like, and it gives me a reason to be a part of GitHub even though I don't have any open source projects. Okay, that's enough about GitHub. Let's go ahead and jump into Git Bash and upload some code to GitHub. In order to connect to GitHub and actually submit code to GitHub, we need to have a secure connection. In order to do this, we need to create an SSH key. So an SSH key comprises of a private key, which goes on our PC, and a public key, which we share with GitHub. We combine this with HTTPS to give us a secure connection, and at this point we have everything we need to upload code to GitHub. So let's go ahead and start with creating an SSH key for GitHub. The first thing we're going to do is go ahead and go to Start, and then go to, for me, it's 308tube. That's the username I logged in under. So this is your personal folder. Go ahead and select that. And in here, make sure that you don't have a .ssh folder. If you do see a .ssh folder, go ahead and back up all the files in your .ssh folders. We might end up overwriting some of these files, so you want to have a backup, and you might have to do some conflict management if you do have a .ssh folder right now. Now let's go ahead and open up Git Bash, and from here let's type ssh-keygen -lowercase t. Lowercase t allows us to define what type of key we want to create, and we want to create an RSA key, and then dash uppercase C, which allows us to add a comment. And in here we're going to go ahead and type in our email address. Go ahead and then select enter. It will right here tell us exactly where the key is going to be placed. Go ahead and press enter. At this point you need to put in a key phrase, so every single time this key is used it's going to ask for this password. This is basically a two-factor authentication, and it's definitely important to have a second password. So go ahead and type in your password. Hopefully I typed that in correctly. I did. So at this point, if I go back in here, you'll notice I have a new folder called .ssh, And if I go in here, I have my private key here, and I have my public key here. Go ahead and open up rsa.pub with either Notepad or Word. I would recommend Notepad. And then go ahead and select the entire line and do a copy. And hopefully you kept your GitHub web browser opened. Go ahead and go to Account Settings. And then we're going to go to SSH Key. And then we're going to select Add SSH Key. And then it's good to give a descriptive title. So I'm going to say 308 tube Mac PC. And then go ahead and paste that RSA key in there. Select Add. It'll ask me for my password. And voila, now we have our SSH key in GitHub. This is the public key. And we have our private key on our PC. So now we're all set to be able to upload code to GitHub. If you want to do a quick test to ensure that your SSH key is working, go ahead and go back to Git Bash and type in the following command: ssh-t git at github.com, and it'll ask you if you want to continue. Type yes, and then it'll ask you for your key phrase, which is your password. Go ahead and enter that, and what it'll say is, "Hi, test3082, which is my account name, and GitHub. You have successfully authenticated, but GitHub does not provide shell access." So we have tested that we can communicate with GitHub using our SSH key. Let's go ahead and actually upload a project into GitHub. So I'm going to go ahead and use Eclipse and create a project to upload to GitHub. So I'm going to go ahead and close this out. I'm going to do a file, new, and then I will do a basic web page. Let's see if it's on here. I'll go ahead and choose other, and then scroll down. Go ahead and do web, and then I'm just going to select a static web page. Something simple. Test 3082. Finish. And in here, I will go ahead and create an HTML file. Go ahead and name it index.html. Let's widen this out a little bit. And then I say, hello, this is a test of GitHub. And then I will save that. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and minimize this. So from my Git Bash, I can type ls. And I should be where I created my project. When I first started Eclipse, all of my projects go into this subdirectory right here. And as you can see, test.3082, that project folder is already here. So I'm going to go ahead and do change directory, test3082. Then I'm going to type git init to make this into a Git repository. Then I'll type git add dot. So I added all of the folders into the staging area. So if I do a git status, you'll see that all these folders are now green and they're in my staging area. Then I'm going to do a git commit -m initial commit, and that is saved. So if I do a git log now, I should see my first initial commit. Okay, so now it's time to go ahead and create a connection to GitHub and push this code into GitHub. So the next command that I'm going to type is git remote add. So what remote add does is that it tells Git that I want to add a remote repository. So it knows that I'm not saving any of these things to the local repository that's on my PC. And now I need to give that remote repository a name. And a common name is giving it a name of origin. At this point, I need to tell it where that where origin is. So I need to go ahead and go back to GitHub. Whoops, wrong one. Go ahead and go to GitHub. I'm going to go ahead and get back to the main page. And then I'm going to select my name. Easier to select this one. And then I want to go to youtube.demo, and that's where I want to be. And go ahead and select the Ssh tab. And what I want to do is I want to copy this. And then I want to paste it into here. So go ahead and do edit, paste, and then hit enter. So at this point, Git, my local Git, knows where origin is. So now I can do git push, which means upload in Git terms. And then I can say origin, because that's what I just named my remote repository. And I want to push the master branch, which is the main branch, which is what what you initially get when you create a Git repository. And then go ahead and select enter. It'll ask you for your key phrase password. And there's the upload. So at this point, if we go back to the website and we go ahead and do a refresh, there is our files that we just created. And there's the index page. And as you can see, you can go in here and look at the code. So let's go ahead and back on out. I'm going to go ahead and minimize this again and open up my Eclipse. So we already did the initial upload to GitHub. So we're going to be working on our code some more. And we're going to be adding code. And then we're going to get to the point where we're happy with our code and we want to do another upload. So here's more code. We saved it. Let's minimize this again. Let's go here. And what we want to do is we want to do another git add dot, because we need to get our changes into the staging area. So if you do a git status, it'll say you've modified the index.html page, because that's the only page I've been working on. That's fine. So then we can do a git commit -m, and then we can say more changes to index, hit enter. And then if we do a git log, we can see that we now have 2 commits. And in order to upload to GitHub, all we have to do is say git push origin master. It'll ask us for our key phrase again, and then it will do the upload. So if we go ahead and go back to our web page, do a refresh, you'll notice that the message here for our commit has changed, because within web contents we've made changes to index.html. And if we select this, you'll notice that our code has been uploaded and it has changed. So this is really the most basic use of how to get code up to GitHub. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and stop using Git Bash, and we're going to go ahead and jump into using the Windows GUI. So now we can go ahead and close out Git Bash. Let's go ahead and go back to our web browser, open a new tab, and let's go ahead and go to git-scm.com. And we've been here before, and we'll just go ahead and go to the Windows GUI link, and we can download GitHub for Windows. And this is free, of course. Click up here and it will begin downloading. Once it's done downloading, We can go ahead and run it. Agree to file. And then it will go ahead and start downloading the main package. So I'm going to go ahead and pause the video, and I will pick up when this is done. And we are back. It finished downloading the framework part, so let's go ahead and continue on with the install. And as you can see, after it downloads the Microsoft framework, it goes ahead and downloads the second part of it. And it's going fairly quickly, so I'll go ahead and pause the video again and pick back up. And we are back. Once it finished downloading, it went ahead and did the install and boot itself up. So this would be the first screen you will see after the install was complete. So let's go ahead and quickly close out our web file, and let's shrink this down a bit. Yeah, I shouldn't have closed out that web browser. So let's go ahead and log in with our GitHub ID, 308 tube, and then quickly log in. Check our information, make sure it's correct. Well, it didn't find any of the repositories in our local PC, but that's fine. We'll go ahead and fix that. So once you log in, this is what you would see. If you select the GitHub 308 tube, which is your GitHub account, you'll notice that we already have, it knows about the u2.demo, which we've already uploaded to. But right now, it doesn't see our local repositories. So let's go ahead and fix that. We can go to Tools, go to Options. So right up here, instead of going to Users 3082 Documents GitHub, we'll go ahead and change that to where we want it to be pointed. So let's go ahead and go to Desktop, My Computer, C. For me, it's Oracle J Projects. Then I will update. Hold on. So let's go back into Options and then scan for repositories. And there we go. It sees those. We can hit Add and then Update. And now we have both of our repositories that's on our local PC here. So if you go ahead and highlight over this little icon, it'll tell you that you have a local clone of this repository. Because once we've actually found these repositories, it knows that u2.demo is the same as u2.demo up here in GitHub. And if you go ahead and select this little arrow, it'll go ahead and go up to GitHub and show you the commit history that's actually saved in GitHub right now. So we have the initial commit, and then we did another commit in which we changed the index.html file. You go ahead and go up here to use the back button, and up here in our local directory, if you select this, right now it'll tell me that I don't have a readme file, which is true. In the next demo, we'll go ahead and fix that. But if you select this, again, it'll show you the same thing. Now if we make a change to it, then it'll tell us that there's more changes that we need to commit. So let's go ahead and do a completely new project with the GUI client. So let's go ahead and open up our Eclipse again, and we'll go ahead and select a new static web page, and we'll name this Test 308 Tube 2, and then we'll hit Finish. So there we go. And in our web contents again, we will create another index.html file. And then in here we'll say GitHub Windows Client. We'll go ahead and save that. And this time we'll also create a new README file. So a README file is like a wiki for your Git project. It's a good way to share information and keep people up to date about your project. And what GitHub will do, and also Git, is that it'll read that file and then it'll display it. It's really useful, and we'll see that in a second. So let's go ahead and create a README. .md, which stands for markdown. And then in here we'll do a pound sign. A pound sign is like it's a header tag. It's like an H1 tag for a markdown. So we'll say test number 2 for GitHub Windows, and we'll save that. We'll go ahead and minimize this again, and then in here in the GitHub client we'll go ahead and select add, and then we will say test 308 tube 2. Now you want to make sure that it's the same folder name as test.308 tube 2 inside Eclipse, and then we can say test GitHub Windows Client, and it'll say push to github.com. I'm gonna go ahead and unselect that for now. If you do want to just straight push it up to it, then you can go ahead and just check this. But then we're gonna hit create, and if you'll notice on this side we have our readme file, and it actually shows what I put in the readme file. If you don't have a readme file, obviously there will be nothing displayed over here. So let's go ahead and push this little arrow key, and the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna do a commit. So let's say initial commit, and then just say initial, and then you'll commit it. So right away you'll notice that there's a lot of changes or a lot of things that you don't see when you use the Windows client. The command git init you kind of do when you do an add up here. Also, when you come in here and you do an actual commit, you don't really see the idea or the concept of a staging area. That's kind of, in the background. You don't really notice it. And then when you really want to push it up to GitHub, let's go ahead and hit this arrow again, and you select this option up here, push to GitHub. And let's see, Windows Client, and then you can say if you do have a private repository, you can obviously check this, but we're going to be pushing to a public one. So go ahead and hit push, and it gives you this nice little flowchart, I guess, of it pushing up to GitHub. And if you hit back now and come down here, this is now in GitHub. So let's go ahead and open up a web browser, head over to GitHub, and what we should see if we select this up here is our second GitHub repository. And if we I thought we pushed that to GitHub. Oh, okay. So let's go ahead and do a publish. And now if we do a refresh, okay, now there's the code. And you'll notice that since we have a Readme Md, the Readme file now shows up as part of the main page. If we go back to the initial demo, when we don't have a Readme file, it'll ask you to go ahead and put a Readme file in there. So let's go ahead and do an update to a Git project that's already in GitHub. So we'll go ahead and we'll minimize this again. We'll go ahead and back out of this, back up to the main screen, and we'll go into our Eclipse again. Let's close this out. Let's go ahead and add some more lines of code into our index page, and we'll save that. We'll go ahead and minimize that. Now if we go ahead and use that arrow key again, and we come in here, it'll notice that I've added more code, and it'll ask me to commit these changes, and I'm going to say added more code index.html file, and then we will do a commit. It'll tell me that there are no other files that I can commit in the local repository, and I can go ahead and select this to do a sync up to GitHub. Alright, it's done. So if I come in here, and let me get back out to the main page and select the proper page, and I will do a refresh. Once I do a refresh, you'll notice that the message more code, which is what I used in the second commit, is now displayed. And if I go into the index.html page, there's the change that I made for the second commit. And that really is the end of the demo. As you can see, the Windows client is much easier to use, but again, it hides a lot of what's actually happening in the background. Oh, also one more thing that I do want to show is if you go into account settings and then you go into Ssh Key, you'll notice that it uses the same key that you've already set up. Now, if this key did not exist, it will create one automatically for you. You actually don't have to do the SSH key step. It just magically happens. And what you would want to do is you would want to come in here and make sure that you recognize the title, so that if you were ever to need to delete it because you have multiple SSH keys, that you would know which one to delete. And that is the end of the demo. Now let's take a moment to talk about what we're going to see in part 3 of the Git and GitHub tutorial series. Up until this point, most of the features that we've been talking about is pretty standard basic for almost all version control systems. At this point, we're going to start talking about features that really help Git separate itself from other version control systems. The concept of branching allows you to create what appears to be a second working directory. So in other words, when you do a branch, it looks like you're creating a copy of your working directory. So let's say, for example, you want to implement a new feature onto your website, and you have two ideas that you want to try. What you can do is you can create two separate branches, and what it'll look like is two clones of your working directory or your master project. You can then develop both those branches in different ways, and then you can see which one you like, and it's very easy to flip-flap between all of the branches. What's nice about this branching is that you're not actually duplicating any files. Git actually handles all of that in the background, so when you're flipping back and forth, all it's doing is modifying the header of its Git version control. Everything's handled quite seamlessly, and you don't really have to worry about files and file management. Now, having the ability to branch means you also need to have the ability to merge, and that's exactly what Git is really good at. It's able to merge branches into each other, and it does it in a very efficient manner. Cloning allows other developers to copy your code from a remote repository to their local PC. So basically, anytime somebody pulls from GitHub, they're doing a clone. The word forking is not actually a Git term. It's actually a GitHub term used to promote social coding. This is used when someone wants to contribute to somebody else's project or would like to use someone else's project as a starting point for their own. This is known as forking. As you can see, most of these features will allow multiple developers to work on the same project together. Thank you for your time, and to my subscribers, thank you for your support.